Okay, very big welcome to Pennine Ham Amateur Radio Club. Big welcome to our members and friends, and welcome to visitors from other parts of the amateur radio community. Very, very welcome to come to any or all of our meetings. You don't have to be a member of Pennine Ham to attend our meetings. And a very big welcome to Steve, G0FUW. Steve is the chair of the GQRP Club, of which several members in the room here are members of the GQRP Club, and we often have discussions in the after part of the meetings about some of the latest articles, Steve, in Sprat, and some of the builds that are suggested in there. So it's a frequent discussion between a group of people in the club here. And one of the things, Steve, that and I know this features very highly in Sprat, the GQRP Club magazine, is that we've all discovered as active radio amateurs, one of the things we can do, we might struggle to build ourselves an all singing, all dancing multi-mode transceiver for HF that would do half of even a radio built 20 or 30 years ago. And whatever we constructed was going to be 5 times the size of that anyway. But one thing we can do is build antennas and play with different kinds of antennas. And we have long-running debates in the club about all kinds of new antennas. And that reminds me, and I must put it out more widely, but Jeff ON8NT published an article which is in Flemish and French, but you can get it translated on Google Translate if you want the article, for a portable 10-meter hex beam, which when you think about it is actually quite a small antenna, a single band hex beam giving decent gain and good front to back ratio. So a nice little build that came out of the Flemish speaking end of Belgium. So Jeff sent me the link to that, and I must make it available to club members. So Steve, enough from me. I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, and you can bring us up to date with what the GQRP Club are doing and where QRP is at currently in Britain and throughout the world, probably. Steve, over to you.
Thank you very much, and great to see so many people on the screen. I'll get my slides up in a minute, but just to pick up on what Nick was saying there about antennas, it's one of the topics that always attracts lots of attention. And we are, this is the first advert of the night. We're currently working on a 3rd edition of our antenna handbook. We hope to have that available probably for the new year. We're sort of working on it, and the guy who's doing the collation of the articles actually did a talk for us last year at the convention, and he just loves antennas and building antennas, so he's exactly the right person to put some effort into putting that book together. So we hope to have that ready around about the turn of the year. Sort of new for 26 is the current sort of mantra. So watch out for that. If you're interested in antennas, it'll be like a collection of 50 years of QRP antennas. So without further, that's not in my presentation, but it was prompted by Nick's introduction. Am I okay to share my screen?
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Yeah.
Right, I can see it. Can you see it? Okay.
Not. Yeah, we can see this opening slide now. Yes, absolutely fine.
Fantastic. Well, I won't just repeat what Nick's just said there. You can all read that. I'll move on to the agenda. Always like to have an agenda for these things, or call it a menu for a change. Nick said, could you do as an introduction about sort of QRP operating on from the discussion before the thing? There's obviously a number of people who are avid QRPers already, but always worth a refresh. So I thought I'll start at the basics, start at the very beginning. It's a good place to start, apparently. Somebody wrote a song about that. And we'll go through what is QRP, why would you bother doing it, building radios, commercial radio options, operating skills, and then a bit about the club, the GQRP Club. If anybody who hasn't heard of it, you will tonight. And just a little bit of coverage of what we did for our 50th anniversary, because it's not a new club by any means. And this year we've been celebrating 50 years of GQRP, so there's been some activity there. And very importantly, if there's any questions, I would ask if you can keep them to the end or pop them in the chat, just so I can get through the presentation, and then we can pick them up at the end if that's okay. I tend to go off on a tangent, and we might never finish if we do it live. So if you could do that, that'd be cool. So start at the very beginning. As I said, what is QRP? Well, it's low power radio communication. And after some fairly heated debates in the 80s about what QRP actually was, there was an internationally agreed sort of pact, if that's the right term, that if you were operating CW, then 5 watts output maximum, and for SSB, 10 watts PEP, gave about the same sort of return for your money. And generally that's what's used by Arky over in the States and ourselves in the UK. We've still got some odd things. The RSGB contests don't necessarily match those levels. If they call it a QRP section, it might be 10 watts CW, but people get very confused about that. But that's what's generally accepted as QRP levels. People ask about data and FM, and data tends to be, well, some people say it should be treated as SSB because you're feeding audio tones into an SSB transceiver usually. Other people say it should be like CW because it's more sort of punchy. Quite frankly, if you can work them with 5 watts, you're not going to gain a lot by going to 10 watts, so it's not really an issue. And for FM, well, there ain't that much QRP stuff going on in FM, but I've certainly done some 10 meter FM work with 4 watts, and again, putting it up to 10 watts wouldn't get you much further, I don't think. So I tend to stick with 5 watts as the norm, and 10 watts for SSB. The real black belts go for QRPP, so that's a double P at the end, and that's less than 1 watt out. And I've had a go at that a couple of times, and it works on the right day and with the right conditions, shall we say. But as you'll see later, there are those that devote themselves to that kind of level, and they see 5 watts as being way too much power, so they just stick down to the milliwatts and so on. Where did all this come from? Well, it started with the Q code on telegraphy. So before we had wireless, we had wired communication, and you had these Q codes which were used to get messages across quickly with abbreviations. And the 2 examples there, if you put a question mark after the QRP, it means please can you reduce your power, and the return to that QRP would be I have reduced my power. So that's really where the origin of this came from. And the final sort of thing about QRP is it's good operating practice. The general rule is you only use as much power that you need to make the contact, no more, so you don't pollute the bands and so on. That's also what QRP is. It's good operating practice. No, not an advert for the QRP Club per se, but the picture you can see there, I thought it was quite appropriate to have a QRP watt meter. It actually goes up to 20 watts, but I've got one of these. It comes from Kanga, and they are absolutely brilliant. For 5 watts for CW, flick it over onto 20 watts for SSB, you get the peak thing. It's excellent. And then there's a sample port you can put into your oscilloscope if you want to look at waveforms and things like that. So a really handy bit of kit. And the link with the club is that's the project we're building at this year's Buildathon at the QRP convention, and more about that later. So let's move on. It says if my thing will actually move on. Let's try a click. There we go. So what can be achieved with QRP? And a question we're often asked, is there any point using low power? You're just going to end up talking to yourself or warming the ether and not actually doing very much. Well, it should come as no surprise as chairman of the QRP Club that I would say, yes, it is worth operating with low power, and you can achieve quite a lot. The reason that you can do this, that people sort of equate power with signals and so on, but it's important to remember that 1 S point on your meter equates to 6 decibels. So if you're going to increase by 1 S point, you need to increase by 6 decibels. If you're decreasing your power by 6 decibels, you'll only lose 1 S point. So what that means, half power is 3 dB, and it actually means you've got to go to a quarter of your power to lose 1 S point. And that means that you can still have decent QSOs with some fairly low powers. And an illustration of that, which is often used, imagine you're working someone who's operating with 400 watts and you're receiving them at 9 plus 6 dB. It's probably going to be a bit more than that, but for ease of reckoning, let's go with 6 dB. So they reduce the power to a quarter. So 100 watts, you lose that 6 decibels. There's still S9. You quarter it again, down to 25 watts, and you've lost one more S point, S8. Quarter it again. Okay, the maths don't quite work out, but 6 watts is near enough. You'd be S7. Quarter that, 1.5 watts, you're S6. And then way down into the QRPP levels, 750 milliwatts would be S5. So you can see there that you don't have to, be too worried about losing some power. People get really wound up. Oh, I'm losing 1 decibel in my coax. Do you know what? It's not going to make any difference, quite frankly, unless, and the caveat to this, you're on the noise threshold. This is all good and well. If you've got S9 noise on your receive, you ain't going to hear anybody less than 100 watts on that scale. And that's quite often the case at my QTH, that the noise levels can be horrendous, particularly on the lower bands. So I tend not to hear many QRP stations, but I still work the higher powered stations with my QRP because they haven't got a noise problem at their end. So that's all good. Now, if you don't believe that, if you think, oh, Steve's just spinning a yarn here and it doesn't work in practice, have a look at this video on YouTube. Cliff, who runs the QRP School channel, he's got a video called Quadruple Your Power for 1S Unit. And he starts off, I think he's got an Ellicraft or something down at sort of 300 milliwatts, and then he cranks it up to 1 and a bit watts and cranks it up again and again. And he looks at the signal strength on another receiver, and it works. It's he's done another video of SSB, I think, as well. So if you want to see it happening in real time, that's a good video to go and watch. It does work. So what can be achieved? This is sort of based on my experience. Why am I showing you this QSL card? Well, the story behind this QSL card is I was building a BITX, or a BitX, as some people call them, a 20-meter QRP SSB transceiver from scratch. And I had lots of printed circuit boards. There was the oscillator, there was the power amplifier, and they're all on separate boards. And it was wired up across the bench like a rat's nest. And I was just left it running. And this guy was on there chatting away with some friends. And he just said, I wonder if there's anybody listening to this conversation. Would you like to call now? So I flicked the thing into transmit and picked up my homebrew microphone, which was an electric pickup on the end of a ballpoint pen or something. I gave him a call, and to my amazement, he came straight back. And he was really pleased to make the contact because he thought it was his antenna and his receiver that was making it possible. He's not wrong. He had a huge tower and a big beam and so on. But we had a conversation, we had a contact. And he was so pleased to make the QRP contact that he sent me the QSL card direct just a couple of days later. So that was one of my great achievements with QRP. So I have worked USA a number of times with QRP, and I have worked Australia with 3 watts. That wasn't with a homebrew rig, that was with an FT817. It was just sitting on the bench, chirping away while I was working. And there was a special event station from one of the Australian parks. And again, are there any QRP stations out there listening? Gave him a call, straight through with 3 watts of SSB. And I only use a dipole antenna. I haven't got anything fancy. So being in the right place at the right time, it can happen. Speaking of which, I was on holiday in France one year, and I've been working loads and loads of Delta Lima stations just over in Germany on 40 and 20, I think. And it was the last day of the holiday, and I thought I'll make one more call and see if I can make one more contact. And this guy came by. Oh, it's another DL. Great joy. Sent back the call, and he went, no, not DL, ZL. So that was from rural France down to New Zealand with 3 watts of CW, and a half-size G5RV was my antenna. So again, nothing fancy, nothing clever. It was just being in the right place at the right time. And again, I've got a QSL card for that. I should have put that on the slide. Across Europe, commonplace working across Europe. I tried something last week before on to see if I wasn't getting any replies, so I went on the reverse beacon network, and I was hitting Scandinavia, Croatia. The reports were coming in from all across Europe, and that was just with a couple of watts of CW. Now, some people say, "Oh, this is all good and well, Steve, but have you always been QRP?" And I have to confess, I haven't. I've had radios with 100 watts. I've even operated a linear on occasions, not from my home station, but from a club station. As I always say, I never took an oath when I joined the QRP club that I would never use more than QRP levels. Sometimes needs must, and particularly if you're demonstrating amateur radio to new people, they haven't necessarily got the time and the patience to wait around for a QRP contact, so you might need a bit more power. So I don't get, I'm not an evangelist on this, and some people get really wound up. If you want to use 100 watts, use 100 watts. That's your thing. I just tend to enjoy using QRP, and that's just my thing. So what else can be achieved? Well, tinged with sadness, this. Carl, GW0VSW, absolute diamond geezer, as they say, sadly passed away, I think it was around about Christmas time. Really, really nice guy, had suffered from a long-standing illness, and it won the battle, sadly. But Carl had a long track record with the QRP club and others as well for operating, brilliant operator. And in 2019, he won the club's Chelmsley Trophy. And you think, well, what the heck's that, Steve? We've never heard of it. The trophy's issued to the best log for a whole year. So people just submit a year's worth of contacts, and our activities manager looks through them and decides which the best one is. That's not necessarily the most contacts. It might be, the variety of radios. It might be the fact that they've put themselves out and gone on a SOTA expedition, or, whatever. It's the best log for the year. But this was Carl's entry for 2019. 1,400 QSOs, all QRP. A mixture of CW and SSB. Nearly 120 of them were two-way QRP. And he covered 71 DXCC entities. He was gutted he hadn't got the 100, but it was a pretty good show in 2019. The bands weren't that great at that point. He'd worked on all bands from 160 to 10 meters, and the vast majority were 4 watts and a G5RV. So again, it wasn't the equipment, it was the operating skills that got him that. He also won that trophy in 2018 and 1999. So he's a long-standing sort of good operator. He was. And he also won the Suffolk Trophy, which is our best entry on World QRP Day, which is in June every year. So, the guy was a good operator, but he didn't have any massive kit. He was using little miniature radios, and I think in his latter years, his favorite was a little Zygo G90. He said it was amazing what he could work with that, and had great success. So that was Carl. The next one is still with us, thankfully. Chris Page, G4BUE. Chris saw what Carl had done and thought, I'm going to top that. And Chris has won that Chelmsley Trophy for the best log of the year for 3 years on the trot, 22, 23 and 24. I'm not sure whether he's got the sort of goal to go in for it again this year, but he probably will, because 3 is the best it's ever been. So I think he's trying to break the record. Chris's log was, I think this is a 2022 one, absolutely unbelievable. Over 4,000 QRP QSOs in 42 weeks, because for 10 weeks he didn't have an antenna. Otherwise, it would have been more. Lots of two-way QRPs over the DXCC award. Again, all bands. And I like this. His 4 watts was into what he described as a wet noodle antenna. It was just a dipole or a doublet, 132 feet long. It's sort of been inked in white on that diagram. It isn't white wire, but he's drawn it on there just to show it's not up a huge mast. It's as high as he can get it, and some of it's actually draped along the hedge towards the back end there. So again, a fantastic achievement, and he's done it 3 years on the trot. And he again, great operator, tends to work in a lot of contests, but all with QRP. So anybody says there's no contacts to be made, go and have a chat with Chris. And the final example I've got for you is our old friend again, sadly no longer with us, George, GM3OXX. Before he died, he'd worked 300 countries or DXCC entities, all with less than 1 watt, and every one of them with a homebrew transmitter. I think he had a commercial receiver, but all of his transmitters were homebrew, and the circuit you can see on there is one of his classic ones, the OXO. Many hundreds, if not thousands, of these have been built across the world. A little crystal oscillator, a power amplifier, and a key-in transistor, and that's it. There's a low-pass filter that you can't see on the diagram, but basically you adjust the emitter resistor in the power amplifier to give you, in George's case, just under 1 watt. He used to wince. He said, if you want more than 1 watt, build a different rig. So that was his design criteria. And we built loads of these. Our classes that we run, we used to use this as a project, and yeah, they just work. And amazing that you could work 300 countries with again, all with wire antennas. So yeah, can you achieve things with QRP? Darn right you can. But why would you? That's my next question. what, if you're allowed to run a kilowatt or something, why would you put yourself through the pain of lowering the power and struggling? Well, there's a number of reasons. First one is portability, and the slide, I forget which club it is this now. I think it might be the Hereford Club. They do an entry into the PWQRP contest every year on 2 meters. And of course, you can carry a QRP rig and a couple of batteries and a portable antenna up a mountain, set up, operate, and break it all down and go home and leave nothing but footprints, as they say. And lots of people find this to be a great asset for the QRP part of the hobby. Summits on the air, parks on the air, you name it on the air, is a great way of operating with QRP. And I remember reading, I forget the call sign, a guy used to go up mountains in America with goats carrying his gear. It's a different way of carrying your pack, but it for some people that's the fascination.
He had a dog that he fitted.
Now the next one, this is slightly tongue-in-cheek. This one, the low-cost aspect of QRP. If you're building your own rigs, like the one on the previous slide and similar things, I'll show you some other examples shortly, it doesn't have to cost a fortune. You can build a radio for a few tens of pounds and be on the air without any huge expense. If you want to buy a commercial radio, then that's not quite the same, but we'll come back to that. So some people like it. Certainly when I came into the hobby, I couldn't afford to buy any commercial gear, so I built my own radios to keep the cost down. And I've still got some of those radios and I still use them. It kind of set me on a path that I've never really deviated from. More recently, QRP's become more attractive because it's guaranteed to be below the EMF threshold. That's the electromagnetic fields threshold. As you're all probably aware, if you're transmitting less than 10 watts EIRP, then you don't have to do any detailed assessments to see if you're frying your neighbors or cooking the neighbors' pigeons or whatever. QRP just hasn't got the power to do that. So that's a great advantage. You can operate, without any fear of anybody thinking that they're going to melt because of your transmissions. And kind of related to that is EMC, electromagnetic compatibility. There's less risk of causing interference if you're running low power. The more power you run, the more chance there is you're going to break through onto somebody's TV, radio, baby alarm, whatever. But with QRP, that's not as big a problem. I'm not saying it isn't a problem, and certainly I had an HW8. There's only like 2 watts out of it, and it used to wipe out our TV in our own house. But a few ferrite rings and a filter, and that was sorted. But it doesn't mean you won't have a problem, but it'd be a much greater problem if you were running a kilowatt for sure. And probably the greatest reason for doing QRP is the challenge. And I often liken it to fly fishing. My namesake, J.R. Hartley, wrote a book apparently. The challenge of QRP is that to try and do what everybody else is doing with 100 watts, but with less. And it's like you could go out with a trawler down a river and scoop up all the salmon, or you could sit on the bank and use a bit of skill with a fly fishing rod and pull them out one at a time. It's a similar sort of analogy with QRP. You're not going to sort of fill your logbook with 100 countries in a day, which you might do with a higher powered station, but at least you've got the rest of the year to look forward to of filling in a few of the gaps. So it is a challenge, and people certainly rise to that challenge, and we get some fantastic results, as you've seen already from some of the examples I've given you. Now, I've given you lots of the positive messages. Are there any downsides? Well, inevitably on anything, there's always a downside, isn't there? And the first one really is that frustration of waiting to be heard. If you're on the air and you've only got 5 or 10 watts of power, and everybody else has got the kilowatt or even 100 watts, you are going to be a couple of S points quieter. So you might have to wait until all the big guns have got their QSOs in. If you really want to work a particular station, you just hang about until things go quiet and then call, and you will get the QSO. Done it many times myself. But that can be frustrating. It's usually just as you get that quiet moment, they go QRT and you've lost it, wasted some time waiting. But hey, that life's life's there to be enjoyed. Military equipment. I certainly found as I've got older and my eyesight's not as good as it used to be, really teeny tiny rigs I find difficult to operate. My fat fingers press the wrong buttons and things like that. And even to the point where things can get lost. I've built things and completely lost them. They've gone down the back of a bookcase or something, or they've got lost in a box somewhere. And that can be very frustrating. So, the number of times I've rebuilt something only to then find the original a week later, I've lost count of that. So that can be a downside. And I tend to build my radios to be radio sized these days. I'm not a great fan of the teeny tiny things, but again, some people like pocket radios. The other downside is people who think they know better, this jibe that is often trotted out, oh, life's too short for QRP, because they don't want to hang about and wait for the contact. But I always say life's too short for QRO, because if you go on with a big amplifier and a beam and all the rest of it, and you work the world in a weekend, what are you going to do then? Well, you do it all again with low power. So that's where the challenge comes in. So if anybody's been subject to that, life's too short for QRP, it's plenty of time to enjoy it. It's good fun. Again, talked about homebrew a little bit already, and that's a question we often get asked. Well, do people still do that? Why would you go down to Martin Lynch or Radio World or whatever and just splash the cash, get the plastic out and buy a radio? Well, yes, people do still build radios. And that list there of all the things that our club sold in the last 15 years, kits, project books, crystals, transistors and ICs, toroids, in the thousands. So somebody somewhere, they're either making radios or they're just stuffing their shelves with spare parts. I don't know. But the evidence is that people do bring radios along to the convention, shows what they've been building. And the picture you can see there, that was actually one of the buildathons we did at our convention. 16 people there building a VFO, a variable frequency oscillator. Now, what we hadn't told them when they were started building it is each one of them was slightly different. And what we did after they'd built it, we then did what's called a driftathon to see who'd got the best VFO in terms of stability and who'd got the worst one. And they won a prize for having the greatest drift. And we had, as you'd expect, a range of results. One that barely moved from switch on to another one that, quite frankly, if it was still switched on, it'd still be drifting. But we'd kind of fixed it that way by putting weird capacitors and things in the kits. We gave everybody a full set of good capacitors at the end, so they could then, rework it to get it stable. And all the feedback I had was that happened. So, but there's evidence. People building radios. It was good fun. Now, as this might be lost on our overseas viewers, but as they used to say on Blue Peter, here's what I built earlier. This was a transmitter I built from scratch. The circuit was one of George's GM30XX. He had this thing called the Wanner. And he called it the Wanner because it was built on a 1-inch square printed circuit board. And I just found that too fiddly. So I built an expanded version of it, and it's a 2.5er, I think. It's 2.5 inches square. But I also included the low pass filter on the board. So I put in more than George had done on his original. But that's sort of my noodling of drawing out the plan, drilling out the circuit board, and then making it. And that's the photograph is the final version. And that's, it's only what, three transistors in the sort of transmit chain and one to key it on and off. And that produces a couple of watts on, I think that's on 5 megs. And I've had QSOs with that coming up my ears, and it's I don't think it would have cost £10 to build that, something like that. But that with if you've got an SDR receiver, a little changeover, you're on the air for next to nothing. As long as you can do CW, of course. That's a barrier for some people, I know, but it just goes to show you can build some simple things. This is a slightly more complicated one that I built. Not my design by any means. It was originally in the Radcom magazine, quarter of a century ago. And I was asked to write a chapter for the RSGB handbook, and which I did. And the editor decided that it needed padding out a little bit. So he brought forward this article from Radcom and added it to my chapter, which is great. So there was some words from me and then a practical project following it. Then 2022, the new editor came to me and said, right, we're just checking it, everything's up to date. Is your chapter okay? And in particular, is the project still okay? And I realized that if it seemed to be in my chapter, I probably ought to be able to put hand on heart and say it was a good design and it worked. So I built one. And that's the photograph of it, front panel at the top there and a top-down view looking inside the radio. And what I found was that some of the parts that were originally used 25, 26 years ago were no longer available. So I had to hunt around and see what substitutes there were, and managed to rejig a few of the oddballs. And the most surprising thing to me was when I plugged it in, I could hear stations on 80 meters that I hadn't been able to hear for a long time. And came across a guy calling CQ. So I thought, I'll call him back and see what happens. And with a couple of watts from the Hornbrew radio, I had a decent contact into Northern Ireland. And so I was much happier then that it was going to go in the book, knowing that it was buildable, it was work, it could workstations, and I did a little write up in Radcom. So after that, I did some mods. I added a CW filter, and I can't remember. There was other couple of modifications that I did, which I haven't written up. I probably ought to. But it is a viable project in 2025, even though it's dates back to the 1990s. Now, not everybody wants to build from scratch. A lot of people build from kits, and that's a perfectly good way of starting with Homebrew. And no reason to deviate from that if that's what you like doing. So I've got a few examples of kits that are available, things, because again, people say, "Oh, that's great, but you can't buy kits anymore." Well, yes, you can if you know where to look. And the first one I'd point to is Walford Electronics. Tim Walford, a very good friend of mine, lives down in Somerset, and he runs a company called Walford Electronics. It's just Tim, but he calls it Walford Electronics. And he tends to produce these great electronics, but not particularly great mechanical radios. So you have to find a box to put it in and do that yourself. But he's an RF design guy, and he does a blooming good job of producing quality kits. And that's the one that's his current sort of one. I think it's still under development. It's called the Wells transmitter receiver. SSB, it's got a crystal filter in there. I think it does 5 or might even do 10 watts. I can't remember. Great guy and does some great kits. The next one's Kanga UK. Paul, who runs it now, took it over, I don't know, it must be 5 years ago now, and has sort of restocked it with some new kits and revived some of the older ones and kept them going. He's got a whole range from really simple things, like the one up on the left there, the micro tutor, is a little Morse tutor. I think it costs about £10 for the kit. You build it, it'll do CW at you for as long as you want, with difference in speed, difference in gaps. It'll do numbers, it'll do letters, it'll do a mixture. It'll send our call signs to you in what it's called contest mode. We built those with kids, and they love them. They're great. There's a dummy load at the bottom where you can practice surface mount construction. And the aforementioned Stanford wattmeter kit, which he's just bringing back into production. So we're going to be using that as the project at our convention. And I think it's a great project. I would say that it's going to be our convention project. Yeah, enough said. QRP Labs. Anybody's come across Hans Summers? Hans came to our convention last year and did a talk. It's on the YouTube channel if you want to see it. Absolutely amazing guy. Some of his kits are just out of this world and not overly expensive either. The one that really got him up and running big time was the QCX, which the top left is one that we built for YOTA 2017, which was Youngsters on the Air. And I supervised building 90 of those. And without being unkind, I never want to see one again. It drove me nuts, but they worked and people enjoyed it, and it was amazing to see. The one on the right is the QCX Plus, which is a bigger, less cluttered version. And if you were starting for the first time, I'd recommend going for the Plus rather. And the one at the bottom, the Mini, is definitely not for the faint-hearted. Lots and lots crammed into as you can see, a very small package, but performs exceptionally well, and so won't break the bank. And his latest one even does SSB as well, which blows my mind. He's managed to do it in software. So, but yeah, great guy, Hans, and QRP Labs. I cannot recommend them highly enough. This is a bit different. HF Signals over in India. Again, Farhan, who runs the company, came to our convention last year. Absolute diamond of a guy. He was chatting with people and sharing knowledge and things. Brilliant. But the kit this is the BITX kit that's currently available. But it's not, you don't need to do any soldering. It's all more of an assembly job, sort of mechanically fitting the bits together, a little bit of software uploading, I think, and calibrating. But you end up with a multi-band HF SSB transceiver for a few £100. I can't remember the exact price, but it's not again not going to break the bank. For what you get, it's amazing bit of kit. So again, worth having a look at. And at the GQRP Club, so we're going to talk about the GQRP Club in a little while in detail, but we sell kits for transmitters, receivers, antenna tuning units, and we dabbled for a little while with this digital oscillator, which works really well. It's got a built-in keyer. It does pretty much any band you fancy, but no sooner had we finished producing it that the microprocessor we use went out of production, and we just find somebody's. In fact, I've got one here. The latest version is the Teensy. Will actually drop in as a direct replacement, and there's a little bit of software tweaking to be done. So, if I can get that to work, that will be back on the agenda very soon. I said before, it doesn't have to be homebrew. You can go commercial, and here's a selection of what you can currently get. The FT817 was really the first QRP shack in a box miniature portable thing that you could get. Mine's certainly showing its age now. It's been taken around the world. It's been dropped and battered, and still makes QSOs. It's a real workhorse. But there's the new FT. Oh crikey, I forgot now. FT1X, is it the new Yaesu? And apart from a second-hand 817 and the Zygu, all of these things are heading towards £1,000, £2,000, $2,000. So yes, you can go commercial, but you'll need to be prepared to pay your money. The Zygus are getting really good feedback from users, not being overly expensive. The one in the middle, the Lab 599, I saw a review of that. Pete Waters did from Waters and Stanton, pouring water all over it. It's completely waterproof, and if you were going to go out in the field, that's certainly worth a consideration. But Ellicraft got a really good reputation, and of course the ICOM, which sort of broke the mold in terms of what was feasible with SDR capabilities and so on. So lots of radio for your money, but lots of money to get them as well. So as it says on the slide, the other option, of course, is if you've got a QRO rig, just turn the power down. Most of them will go down to 10 watts. Some of them will go down to 5 watts. So you can try QRP without any expense if you've already got a radio. And again, I wouldn't knock anybody for using commercial gear. If that's what you want to do, then fill your boots and get on the air and operate. I just tend to lean towards the homebrew side of things more than the commercial. A question we often get asked, but all you do is CW. Though what it's no good. I can't do CW, so I can't do QRP. Well, that's not the case. We've got lots of people using QRP SSB. We've got the 10-watt limit, as I said. If you want to check out what's feasible, there's a talk on our YouTube channel by Pete N6QW. He shared a design with us for a simple SSB transceiver, and you can build it. It's not difficult, and you can use it. It certainly works. Data. Now, a lot of people sort of get sniffy about FT8 and the likes, but you've still got to be on the keyboard. You've still got to make the contact, and it's great for QRP. People say, I only run 50 watts for my FT8. You don't need that. It's a weak signal mode. 5 or 10 watts is more than enough to make the contact. And again, talk on the YouTube channel. Anthony K8ZT did a talk. He said it changed his whole life in terms of operating. I think he got bored making CW contacts and sort of been there, done it, got the T-shirt, discovered FT8, and his QSO rate went up, his enjoyment levels went up. it floated his boat. So, well done him. VHF. Now, again, a lot of people associate the QRP Club with HF, but VHF is equally viable for QRP. I personally have worked Italy with 500 milliwatts of SSB on 6 meters. And that wasn't a fluke or anything. Well, it was a fluke in that I was in the right place at the right time. But I had a 6 meter transverter which only produced 500 milliwatts, and had it connected to a loop in the loft, really just for listening. And suddenly the band was full of Italians. I thought, well, I'll try calling one and see what happens. And I think I worked 8 or 9, maybe 10 in an afternoon, all with 500 milliwatts. I was absolutely, over the moon with that. So, VHF is viable. Practical Wireless run QRP contests for 2 meters and 4 meters. Lots of QSOs happen there. I've been phoned up a mountain more than often with a 2 meter beam and operating that contest. And the RSGB run a 50 meg contest with a QRP section. So, it isn't just about CW on HF. The QRP goes all across the board. And we even had an article in our magazine on getting started on 23 centimeters. So QRP can go a long way at that sort of frequency. So yeah, it's not just about CW. I think it goes without saying, good operating skills help whatever kind of radio you operate in. If you just go on and try and blunderbuss your way through a pileup, you're not going to do very well. You've got to use a little bit of skill. And the key to that, of course, is listening. Find out what's going on. Are they working split? Are they working stations from a particular part of the world? Find out what's happening before you wade in. Listen on the band. If it's all quiet, it might be that there's no propagation. There's no point calling CQ until you're blue in the face, complaining nobody's answering if there's no propagation. Been there, done that, got the t-shirt. So knowledge about what's happening with propagation is extremely useful. Go and having a look on the Whisper Net web and see if other people are working across the world. Reverse beacon network is another good one to go to see if propagation's actually working. I've been out there on 10 megs, calling CQ for ages, nobody's answering. You go on the reverse beacon network and your signal's been getting all over the place. It's just that nobody's returned it. Either out sunbathing or drinking beer or whatever people do in the afternoon. Now, there are a number of centres of activity. Every band has a designated QRP centre of activity for CW and for SSB. So you'll find QRP aficionados hang about around those frequencies. So you've got more chance of working other QRP stations in those areas. They get very annoyed during contests when people disregard them as being centres of activity. They just, they're blotted out. And all I say then is go on to the non-contest bands, 10 megs, 18 megs, 24 megs. You won't get obliterated with contests there because they're not supposed to do. I don't think there are any contests on there. They should get short shrift, but there are bands you can use if you don't like contests. Probably the most productive way of making contacts with QRP is to tail end other people's contacts. So you two stations that are pretty strong and you can hear them working, just wait until they finish their contact, they say 7 threes, and then jump in and call one, whoever's frequency it is, give them a call. And I think I've probably made more contacts doing that than ever calling CQ, because somebody's already listening, and the fact you've taken the time and trouble to give them a call with their call sign, I kind of feel obliged to at least answer you, even if it's, well, I can't chat for long because I'm going to get my dinner. At least you've made the contact, and you may spark up a conversation. Bit of one of those love it or hate it topics, contests. If you want to test your QRP station, contests are actually a really good way of doing it, because people are hungry for contacts and they don't care whether you're S5 or S9. They'll tell you you're S9 anyway. But you can make contacts with people that perhaps would ignore you otherwise. So if you want to get your country list up, contests are not a bad thing to do, but you've got to be aware other people may be using much more power, and you might not be able to cut through. But usually, if the station's been calling for a long time and they've not had any replies, they'll take a QRP station because it keeps the log ticking over. Awards. What awards are available? Well, there's quite a few. And these, you're not in competition with anybody else. It's just your achievements. So you can take as long as you wish to achieve these things. Of course, the ARRL DXCC is probably the most popular award that people try and achieve. Work in 100 countries. Doing that with QRP is certainly not impossible. So earlier, Chris did it in a year. But you can work towards that, and I kind of committed I was going to do it in cycle 25. I've not got anywhere near the top, but at least I've made some contacts. The GQRP Club, which I keep mentioning, we've got our own award scheme. If you make, I think it's as few as 10 contacts with different countries, you can get an award for that. And then every 10 after that, you get sort of endorsements. If you work other QRP Club members, there's awards for that. If you make two-way QRP contacts, there's awards for that. And the QRP Master is a kind of amalgam of all of that. So I forget the numbers. You can look it up on the website. But if you've got X number of countries, X number of members, X number of two-way QSOs, you can get a QRP Master Award. And we don't get many of those claimed, but those that do, kudos to them because they've put the hard work in. And the final one is one that I've certainly achieved, is the 1,000 miles per watt award. Basically, you divide the distance that you've traveled, your signals have traveled, by the power that you used. And if the result is 1,000 or more, you qualify for the award. And as you can see there, my contact was with somebody in Massachusetts. I think I was using 3 watts. And that came to 1,056 miles. So I'd squeezed it in there, just enough miles to get the award. And I was very happy to get that. So we come on to the club. What is the QRP Club? Well, like any radio club, it's a gathering of like-minded folk, and it's been around for a little over 50 years now. And the clip that's in the middle of the slide there was in Shortwave magazine in 1974. It was the September edition, and it basically said, this bloke called the Reverend George Dobbs, G3RJV, would be willing to do what to call it the heavy lifting or the donkey work to get the club off the ground if there was enough interest. Well, the fact we're here 50 plus years later, there clearly was enough interest, and George did a fantastic job of getting the club going and keeping it going, and became, well, world famous for his talks and good nature. But sadly passed away and left us with a huge hole to fill. But because he'd done such a good job of setting the club up in the right manner, it's continued, and we continue to thrive to this day. It's a small club in terms of organisation. There's only 4 of us on the committee. I'm the chairman. We've got a treasurer, a membership secretary, and a secretary. That's it. We make things happen. We've got a lot of helpers, people like Tex, who does the editing of our Sprat magazine, Tony, G0FUW, who does the website, and Nigel that does badges, and people that sell books, and there's a whole raft of people, QSL manager, and it really is a team effort. It works because everybody does their little bit and enjoys doing it, which is great. Everybody's a volunteer. We haven't got any paid staff. Expenses are the only things that get paid out. Because we're a not-for-profit. So when we buy things and sell them, we don't do it for profit, which means we can, do some really good deals on things like components and books and kits and so on. And the best news is that membership is £6 a year in the UK. I think it's €15 in Europe. and I forget what the current USA rate is, but if the president slapped some tariffs on that, it probably cost twice as much as it did last year. But anyway, we'll not go there. But it's not a lot of money, put it that way. And I always say it's the best £6 you'll ever spend in amateur radio, but I'm biased. So what do you get for your £6? Well, you join up with 4,000 other paid up members. That's the size of the club. It kind of hovers around 4,000. Some weeks, months, we have 4,100. Sometimes we've got 9,950. And it just depends how many people have renewed the subscriptions that month. But it's about 4,000. It's been like that for over a decade. We have a club call sign, G5LOW, which is most appropriate. And if you work G5LOW, that's the QSL card that you will receive. We have Sprat magazine, which comes out 4 times a year, about 40 odd pages in full colour, circuits, operating tips, news, reviews, etc., all to do with QRP. Club sales will sell you components, books and kits and anything else they happen to have lying around. Again, not for profit, so transistors and things like that we sell for a few pennies. We don't try and make money out of that at all. Mentioned the awards previously, but we also issue a number of trophies every year. The best antenna article in Sprat, what else have we got? There's all sorts. I sit there for about a week every year doing certificates and getting the trophy man. We've got somebody who does trophies to produce the trophies and so on. QSL Bureau sends out cards. Anybody that works the club station gets a card if they want one. And we can send cards out as well because we're members of the RSGB. So that as a club, we can send things out. We've got a website. I've got the URL on the last slide, and we have a YouTube channel, which is basically all our convention talks from the last 5-6 years, whatever it is. But that obviously grows every year, and we add other things in there when we can. We have an annual convention. Started in 1989 at Rochdale. George, as I said, was a reverend, and he decided that it would be a good idea to open up his church and the vicarage as a venue for a rally or a convention. And I went along there. What is the first one or the second one? But seeing somebody doing a talk about making a beam out of bamboo and wire from the pulpit in an Anglican church was quite an interesting sort of different way of working. But it was great. The church hall became a flea market or whatever. Lots of good things. And one of my greatest memories was sitting down at a table with some coffee, and this guy sitting down, do you mind if I sit here? No, feel free. Chatted away with him, and then I spotted his call sign badge, and it was Louis Varney G5RV. And to me, he was a legend, but I'd been having a chat with this guy, was just another great member of the club, and very, again, sadly missed. Anyway, the convention outgrew Rochdale. Well, I think George actually left Rochdale, which was a good reason for him not to use the church anymore. And it moved to Rishworth School, and the picture top left there is the hall at Rishworth School. And we were there for nearly 10 years, and that was great because the school had a great lecture theatre. We did all the usual things, great car parking and so on. And again, things moved on. We had to sort of move from that venue, and we've been coordinated with the Telford Hamfest since 2018. Now, something happened in 2020 and 21, which you may remember, that prevented us from having a convention. So we did our virtual convention, and Nick, the Pennine Ham chair there, was instrumental in helping us make that happen, and very grateful for that. Then in 2022, we went back to a normal sort of thing back at Telford, but because we'd had such a success with the online stuff, we kept it as a hybrid event. So the talks are all streamed live. You can buy a ticket for, I think it's about £5, and get 3 good talks on the Sunday afternoon, or indeed get recordings of them afterwards. And every year we have a build-a-thon, usually about 15, 16 people building a kit. In the evening we have a supper, social supper, where we share war stories over a beer or three. And then on the Sunday we have the talks. And in parallel with that, the club sales stall is part of the Hamfest. So if you want to buy some coax or some toroids or whatever, books and things, they're always available in the rally hall. The other pictures there, the bottom one is some bloke with grey hair giving a talk about scratch building, I think it was, in the lecture theatre. And the happy smiling face there on the right was Damon, who was the first to finish the kit last year, which was a 5-watt CW transmitter, which we call the MBO, or the More Beefy Oxo, which was basically George's original 1-watt thing with a power amplifier strapped on the back of it. So it guaranteed you 5 watts if that's what you wanted. George always said, if you want more than 1 watt, build a different rig. So we did. And hopefully that's going to be a kit available later this year. But Damon was the first to finish and he was very happy about it, as you can see. So I mentioned the 50th anniversary. The convention last year, more by luck than anything else, just happened to land in the same month as the 50th anniversary of that announcement in Shortwave magazine. So where George was saying, if there's enough interest, we'll get a club going. 50 years later, we were having our convention. So we tried to make a bit of a special event out of it. As you do with these occasions, we got some merchandise. We had some special mugs done. They're on the slide there. And they were very popular. Not many left, actually. Usually I can say you can buy them in the foyer if I'm doing a live talk, but we can't do that this evening. We also produced this thing called the Sprat Extra. As you can see, there's a picture of George holding up a stained glass window with his call sign on. The story of that is actually in the magazine as well, which is quite a fascinating one of how it managed to get to George. But that was a collection of George's work, mainly from Shortwave magazine, but also from Sprat and other Practical Wireless and other things. It's 100 pages of absolute gems, and we sell that for £3.50. So that's an example of our not-for-profit ethos. And the yellow thing in the middle with the silver tab is our latest Sprat on a Stick. We thought, as it was our golden anniversary, we'd have a golden stick, which was basically the 200 copies of Sprat that had been produced in one memory stick. It also has the Sprat Extra on there as well, so it really is an extra. And I think that sells for £5 or £6 or something like that. So we actually gave out 50 goodie bags, as it was our 50th anniversary. We gave out 50 goodie bags to the first 50 members that signed in, and they went very quickly, as you can imagine. We held an event called Low and Clear, as opposed to Loud and Clear. It was Low and Clear. And there were 12 special event stations around Europe and the UK, all with either low or QRP in the call sign. And we ran this activity period for a month and said, if you can work more than 5 of these low stations, we'll give you a certificate or an award. Well, it really took off, and some of the special event stations really got stuck into it. The Germans in particular did a really good job, but everybody thoroughly enjoyed themselves. The end result of that, in 30 days, there were over 6,500 QRP contacts, which blew us away. We didn't expect anything like that. It was amazing. So everybody that submitted a log got a certificate to say, well done. And then we had the bronze, silver, gold, and platinum awards. I think it was 5, 10, 15. No, it couldn't have been 15. 5, 10. I'm confusing myself. Oh, yeah, it was band slots. It wasn't just the stations. You could have multiple band slots. You could work the same one 5 times, and so on. Anyway, there was one platinum award, which was every single low station was worked, and that guy got a platinum award. A few people got gold, and we had quite a few of the others. So again, my printer was going into overdrive, printing out certificates and things. Also, which was a nice thing, the people who advertise in Sprat donated prizes to be distributed to whoever we thought was worthy of prizes. So usually most of those people that got awards got a prize as well. And some of those were worth quite a bit of money, kits and various things, but also um, I think there was a set of coasters or something like that. I can't know, but it was a nice thing to do anyway. The RSGB published a book for us. Well, no, the book published it for themselves, but it was promoting the GQRP Club. It was called 50 Years of GQRP, and it was like a best of Sprat, if you like. They published that, and club members get a discount if they buy that. And then we have the SCD project, which was in Practical Wireless. Now, I'm going to just talk for a couple of minutes about what the SCD project is, or was. I suppose it still is. Again, going back in history, this was one of George's first real articles in Shortwave magazine back in 1980. And it started off as a very simple crystal-controlled CW transmitter. There's the circuit on the things. That's the actual page from Shortwave magazine. And loads of these got built. It became a really popular project. And then through 1980, George added a receiver to go with it, and then VFO control and what you then call the bells and whistles, filters, and so on. So it became a fully blown transceiver. And then about a year later, he revisited it, updated it with modifications, and more people were building it. And then 6 years after that, which he actually called it the 7-year itch, because it was 7 years after the original version came out, he published an article called Another Look at the SCD, and he changed the power amplifier for something a bit more robust. And then he even came up again in 1990 in Practical Wireless. So it's got a long history, and the fact that it's been going for so long, we figured it must work. It's a good project to revisit. And I can't remember who it was now, but somebody posted on our email reflector that we ought to have a project so that if somebody wanted to build a QRP rig for the first time, there should be something out there. And the sort of spec was it had to be simple, low cost, but it had to work. And we looked around and kept coming back to the SCD and thinking, well, that's probably it. So we did a bit of research. We pulled a prototype together. We put some kits out to a few chosen people, and then lockdown came along, and it kind of it fizzled out some. I don't know why, but we got involved in other things, shall we say. And then when it came to be our 50th anniversary, people said, well, how about resurrecting that SCD project to mark the 50th anniversary? And yeah, all right, let's do that. And I spoke with Don Practical Wireless and said, look, we're planning to do this. Would you be interested in running it in Practical Wireless? And he did. So there was a serial from April through to August last year, taking one module at a time, giving full construction details, expected test results, etc., etc. And that was it. And it was a labor of love. It took a lot of work, but Don did a great job of making it look very professional, I have to say. So, key question, was it a success? Well, yes, in so much that we now have a CW transceiver design with a printed circuit board that you can build in 2025. That's the golden anniversary printed circuit board. You can see you can snap off the various modules if you wish, or you can just build it as a panel like that. The one that I've got, my 5 meg one there, is built just on a panel like that with interwiring, and it works. It's also been a success in that we got it into Practical Wireless, and probably as a result of that publicity, we've sold nearly 200 of those printed circuit boards. The latest batch were made in French blue because I did a talk for the French QRP convention, and they wanted some printed circuit boards. So we did a batch in French blue for them. So if you see any blue ones around, they've come from France. Yes, it was a success in that a number of clubs have used this as their first build project for their members. and they've been doing a module a month or something like that, and lots of mentoring going on, and it's great to see. Yes, it was a success in that I've had lots of feedback. One chap was emailing me on a almost daily basis saying, I've built mine for 40 meters and I've worked this station. And then the next day, I've worked this station. And it was like, I'm really happy for you, but do I need to know every day that what you've worked on? Probably not. But it was great that he was excited that he'd done it and he'd got the reward for his efforts. Now, there's always a downside to these things. It's not been a success because I haven't yet made a contact on my 5 megahertz version. Probably because I haven't put enough time in, and I haven't got a decent antenna for 5 megs, but I'm determined to do that. I promised myself I was going to do it on World QRP Day this year, and I had to go in for a dental operation. So I wasn't feeling in the right mood for making QRP contacts that day, sadly. But I'll do it soon, I promise. So I had a target of finishing by 9 o'clock with some questions. I hope that's okay with everybody else. This is just a summary slide. I'm not going to go through it all. You can read it for yourself, but I would emphasize the if you want to join the QRP Club, if what you've seen tonight, what you've heard sounds good and you're not already a member, and I quote Bill Meara from the Solder Smoke podcast, he always says, if you're into homebrew and you're not a member of GQRP, you are wrong. Get in there. So, join up now and you'll get the benefit of the membership. So there's a few details on the slide where you can go for other information. There's a few RSGB books. The QRP Basics one is very good. Gives a kind of overview of what QRP is about, some equipment issues and things. That one I mentioned, the 50 years of QRP. It's like a best of Sprat. The ARRL book, Low Power Communication, that's very good. It's like an American version of QRP Basics, really. That's our website, dead easy to remember, gqrp.com. Go on there, there's lots of information. You can join on the membership section. There's a link there to the YouTube channel. There's details of the convention, all the things I've mentioned, awards and all that. And that's my email address. If anybody wants to get in contact after the event, just drop me an email and I'll usually get back to you within 24 hours if I can. And I hope that, or the little cartoon there, it's a desert island, and if you can read the caption is, "Good job you packed the Wanner, Sid." So that little 1-inch square transmitter I mentioned. Doesn't mention what he's receiving on there, but let's not try and analyze it too detailed. So, are there any questions? Nick, if I put it back to you first and see if there's anything come in.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Steve. Very, very good indeed, and very interesting. Thank you for that great introduction both to QRP and the GQRP Club. You mentioned a couple of people there, by the way. Anthony Luska, K8ZT, is a regular participant in our meetings here on a range of subjects, and he's a real enthusiast, as you know, for QRP.
Absolutely.
Although he's also worked QRO for many, many years as well, but now almost certainly all the time QRP. In the chat, one of the people, one of the last questions, specific questions to you was, do you still need to produce QSL cards to verify for club awards?
Yes and no. If you are someone who uses an electronic login system that sort of self-verifies, a printout of that is perfectly acceptable. Ryan, that looks after the awards, will use discretion, shall we say. If it's obvious from what's presented that the QSOs have taken place, that's fine. If you don't do electronic login, then yeah, QSL cards are really the only way of verifying that the contacts have been made. So yeah, that's and from my personal experience, that can be a niggle that you make a really good contact and they never QSL. It drives you nuts. But yeah, that's a long-winded answer of saying yes, you do, if you haven't got any other means of verifying it.
Lovely, thank you very much, Steve. Various other people did make odd comments, not odd, but several different contributions of comments during your chat. So I'll just throw the meeting open and see who would like to make a question or a comment or ask something specifically to Steve on this contribution tonight. Who wants to go first? I'm going to put G0FUW on the spot first, Roger. Jeff, you've been extolling the wonderful success you've had on VHF and UHF QRP operating, running low power, and I think Steve might be interested in hearing the fun you've had there, and also, of course, FT8 on VHF as well.
Well, okay, thank you very much, Steve. Very interesting. And I'm a GQRP member, by the way, and I enjoy Sprat very much. Well, I'm living in an apartment and I have two balconies on the top floor, which is a big advantage. And I'm on the highest point here in the surroundings, so that also helped. But I'm using my antennas on the balcony, and I actually have for 2 meters, 70 centimeters, I have a 5-element log periodic, and in FT8, I work all over Europe actually. Just last week, and there was some sporadic A, and I worked into Echo Alpha 7, which was a great contact, 1700 kilometers or so. So, of course, you have to be patient. You have to wait for the right conditions. And well, I'm running not necessarily QRP, mostly 20 watts, something like that. Not more than 20 watts, because the antennas are too near to my operating position. So that would be too dangerous. But I'm active actually on 2 meters with that log periodic. I'm also active on 4 meters, and I worked into Europe and into the Canary Islands and Azore Islands and things like that with a halo antenna, which is a very small antenna, about 50 centimeters on 50 centimeters, 70 centimeters as with the log periodic antenna. And then on 6 meters, I have the V2000 diamond antenna, which is very effective, I think. And on 23 centimeters, I'm using a flat panel antenna, as they call it, which is again a very small, it's like a dish. It looks like a dish, a flat dish. And it's also something like 50 centimeters on 50 centimeters, but it seems to have 17 dBi of gain according to the specification. Nevertheless, I'm able to work on 23 centimeters into the UK and into other countries. So yeah, but
Brilliant.
yeah, the key, of course, is I'm using digital modes mostly, FT8, but also other ones. And yeah, that's the big advantage, I think. And single sideband, well, if the conditions are right, I made single sideband into Spain. But it's yeah, and NCW even also, but FT8 is really also where most of the activity is. And I always participate in the UK activity contest on the Tuesday evenings, which helps me also to get some contacts. I remember I made a single sideband contact on 70 centimeters with Scotland, with a Golf Mike 4 station. I think it was Golf Mike 4 Juliet Tango Juliet. So that was amazing. I mean, really, really great. Also 750 kilometers or so and single sideband. So that's the situation here, more or less, Steve.
Fantastic. Yeah, really good. Really good.
But it is possible.
Yeah. The what you said about being in a apartment block, I remember writing to George GM30XX when I was new to QRP and reading all of his achievements, and I wrote him a letter, as you did in those days, saying, how do you do this? You know, what sort of antenna have you got? Where, you know, how do you manage this with 1 watt? And he said, well, I've just got a wire dipole split in the middle, fed with twin feeder. He said, but it is between the chimneys on the top of a tower block in the middle of Edinburgh.
Wow.
So he had the caretaker as a friend. So he had the advantage. He didn't need a tower because he was already 20 stories up or something. So,
That's a little bit cheating.
yeah, but in his latter days, he was in a what do you call it, an old folks' home where he couldn't have a huge antenna, and he just had a thing draped around the apple trees in the garden, and he was still working the world, which fantastic. No, but well done, good stuff.
This week I put my antennas down because of the thunderstorm, and on one morning I started to operate FT8 on 20 meters, and I worked in a Norwegian station and a Polish station with 20 watts, and I then realized the antenna was not connected. I had not put up the antenna, so yeah. So I was actually transmitting on my coax, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. Roger, G4UFZ.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I'm a big fan of the constructor side of it. One thing that probably where many people have been scared of is winding coils. And I just thought I'd show you this because I've made a conscious decision this year to sort of try a bit better and practice. So this is a home brew. Just from a schematic, that's a 40-meter bandpass filter. Quite large, you can see from the scale.
Yeah.
See how the professionals do it, and that's a low pass filter, and QRP Labs. So I was scared of it, but I've actually made an effort to try and conquer the fear and have a go. You know, the winding of the coils is a scary thing. Question for you though, I can't remember the answer to this. Why is it called Sprat?
Does anybody know? Nobody's putting their hand up. It's an acronym. It stands for Small Powered Amateur Radio Transmissions.
I couldn't remember.
And I think it equally works, of course, the sprat to catch a mackerel, the analogy that, you use the low power to catch the big stations. But that's what it actually stands for. It's in one of the early sprats, if you go back into the archive. I can't even remember. It may have been the previous chairman that came up with the acronym. But that's what it is. It's Small Powered Amateur Radio Transmissions.
Couldn't remember. I have got the old handbook. I think you recognise that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
The date is there. 1980.
That's it. Yeah, that's where I came in. Yeah.
I have been following this a long time, just not an expert. But it's fun. That's the point. It's fun.
Well, you say about the winding coils. It is a common thing that people get pardon the pun, they get wound up about winding coils. I find it very therapeutic. That I think sitting down and winding a few toroids is my happy place. I can zen out when I'm doing that. And George used to be very much the same at the buildathons. He used to demonstrate, and he kind of almost went into a reverie as he was doing these things. Yeah, he was almost like he was doing a chant, as he was doing the thing, and it can be tricky and it can be very frustrating, particularly using very thin wire, and you get sort of tangled up. But I found going to a slightly thicker gauge makes absolutely no difference to the coil parameters. And it's much easier to wind because it doesn't get tangled up quite so much. So I tend to use a bigger core and thicker wire. It just, my fat fingers work that way.
I made up, I don't know if this will come out or not, but there you go. How about that? This is a four-band whisper low-pass filter for the Sotaband's multi-band whisper boxes. So I can switch any one of the bands in, all built in one box.
Marvelous.
Yeah, but that is lots of cost.
Yeah.
In fact, I picked the box and then try to fit it in afterwards. Yeah.
The difficulty for a lot of people is understanding the cores business, because the cores are not marked. So the core comes to you and it can be yellow or blue or whatever, but trying to figure out which ferrite you've got, which core you've got, how many turns, and trying to measure that afterwards for most people it's like magic. It's literally magical how it happens. You can follow it from a kit, which is where obviously I built that from a kit, but that was just scratch built. And the thing is, I ordered the wrong cores. When it didn't work, I couldn't understand it. I made a typo in the order and I got the wrong ones, and they look identical. Yeah. That's the thing that scares people, that it's like magic. But when it works, it's great. So it's a bit of fun, I suppose. And I promised myself I'm going to do it. So.
Well done. Well, one of the greatest revelations I had was when I realized that my antenna analyzer can measure inductance.
Yeah.
So you just pop it in inductance mode, and if you wound a coil, just stick it across the terminals, and it will tell you what the value is, within a reasonable tolerance. And that's made life so much easier because you stick a few extra turns on, measure it. Oh, it's too much. Take one off, measure it again until you've got the right value. Job's done. So, but you're right. It can be a voyage into the unknown if you're not
I've set myself to a new toy this week, so no longer do we have to guess.
Ah, yes. Yeah, very good. Very good.
That's only this week. So, yeah. This thing's at the back of me. Universal Bridge. Getting retired.
You can't put that in your pocket, can you?
Not quite, no.
And actually, Roger, bandpass filters, which were very, very popular when I first got involved with amateur radio, building single bandpass filters make a difference even to the modern radios. I made myself a 40-meter one and a 20-meter one here, and to put in front of my Icon 7300, and it does make a difference when you are listening on the radio. The stuff it cuts out that you're not even aware it's where. So even on these modern radios, which have got fantastic filtering built into them, the bandpass filters can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
No, I've not tried it in that sense, but I've just tried it in this thing. I've just tried it in test mode.
It's working, yeah.
It's 7.2 megs, so I just need to lower it a little bit. But yeah, but anyway, this is the kind of thing that is fun to do, isn't it? Just have a tinker about with stuff. But
learn by doing. That's been my mantra for a very long time. It's and
one day I'll retire. I'll have more time. But anyway,
as the saying goes, you learn more from your mistakes than from your successes. As somebody once said to me, in that case, I should be a ... genius because they've made that many mistakes.
Anyway, thanks very much, Steve. That was really interesting.
Oh, you're very welcome. Very welcome.
Thank you, Roger. Anyone else with a question or comment? Yeah, Robin.
Oh, this is Steve in Georgia, near Atlanta.
Hang on, Robin.
And,
yeah, Steve, go ahead, Steve. You're next, Robin. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure to be here today and enjoy this. When I'm talking to folks here that are interested in QRP, I'll always tell them, just don't tell yourself you're QRP.
Yes.
And if you don't do that, it works. It's just amazing how well it works. It is like fly fishing. I enjoy that too. It's exactly the same thing. But if you haven't tried it, get on and give it a try. When Tricia and I were in England in the Lake District, we had a great time, and I had a great time with the little QMX, just operating from parks with just a couple of watts. It's wonderful. So if you haven't tried it, I hope you will. And if you hear me, I hope you'll call.
I totally agree with you, Steve. That ethos of just saying, well, I'm on the radio, it doesn't matter whether it's QRP or not. You just get on and do it. And if you don't work, then well, move on and do something else. But there's not many occasions when if I could hear a station well enough that I haven't then been able to work them. There's been others where you get swamped by people calling. But if they're clear, you get in there and you make the contact. So well done. Well done.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Good to see you again. Robin.
Yeah, just to say good evening to Steve and thanks for your talk. Being an ex-student of Steve's, learned a lot. But also, Gail, myself, spent a lot of time QRP from our 1957 Morris Minor. And it's amazing if you've got a good antenna and you find the right spot. It's amazing how far you can go without running big power. So good to see and hear you again, Steve, and thanks for your talk.
Yeah, welcome, Robin, and you're absolutely right. I think going out portable to an area where there isn't any background noise makes a huge difference. I found it the first time I went to France. I switched the radio on and I was convinced that it wasn't working because there wasn't any background noise. And then suddenly this signal appeared and I nearly dropped off my chair. You know, I was used to battling through the noise, but you didn't have to do it, and you could hear so much more. It's like being in a dark sky area where you can see all the stars. Being in an area where there isn't any background noise, you can hear stations that you wouldn't otherwise hear. So it's great. But good to see you again, Robin, and good to see you still in the mix, shall we say?
Yeah, just. Yeah, we're very lucky up here. Lack of noise, lack of interference. The only trouble is at this time of year, the quiet places to go and operate are now full of camper vans with the NC 500. And I know, Steve, you did it the other year, or a bit of it anyway. But it's a shame because when it's good weather, there's not a lot of fun in the winter with the wind and the rain blowing and sitting, getting blown around outside. But there we go. Thanks again, Steve. Good to see you.
And you.
Thank you, Robin. Anyone else with a question or comment I want to put to Steve while we've still got him? I think just to add a couple of observations of my own, Steve, on your talk. Yeah, you reminded me of two things. One was, and I told this story at the club a few weeks ago, but I was out working Portable on the Pennine Way, just at the back of where I live here, a few weeks ago, and a group of kids were out doing a practice run with their teachers for the Duke of Edinburgh hike they had to do. And the first group of kids, there was about 7 or 8 of them, appeared next to me with my pole and Morse code coming out from the radio, asking me what I was doing and who I was talking to. And when I told them that I was chatting to people in other parts of the world, they were like, not down the road. And I said, no, I'm just talking to someone in Serbia at the moment. And then one of these kids said, you must have massive power on that radio there. And I said, actually, I've got 5 watts of power. I said, if you've got a torch in your bag there, it's probably lower power output than your torch has got. And that is enough power to send a radio signal to be picked up in other parts of the world. And these kids, I mean, they were 15-year-old kids. They were completely amazed about this and really taken with Morse code. So, you know, we've had this discussion a few times in the club here with some of our speakers coming in. You know, that if we can get into places to get that kind of message out, I am certain we will attract a new generation to amateur radio. And I know, I mean, Jeff was in Belgium, ON8NT, introduced us to a Belgian radio hammer, gave us a talk a few weeks ago about radio astronomy, not specifically amateur radio, but his talk about what he could achieve through his homemade radio astronomy efforts and what he's been listening out for and things were just spellbinding. And you just know, he was saying that they have given some talks in their club there to some of the schools, but there hasn't really, nothing much has emerged out of it. But I guess, like everything else in life, it requires someone, you know, where you've got a teacher in a school who is a licensed radio amateur and they start a club, they'll get a group of kids interested, and you'll get a series of kids getting their licenses. But when we've had that locally, not in our club, but in Oldham Amateur Radio Club just down the road, they've had a couple of people who are teachers teaching at a school who ran a very, very active radio club for many years while they were still at the school. And I think, you know, there is something still very exciting about this idea that, as you say, Steve, you know, very, very simple radio aerial, very, very simple piece of equipment, very low power, you know, running off a 9-volt battery, that you can talk to people elsewhere in the world on that. It's pretty amazing.
I don't know how many people have seen it, but up in Robin's part of the world, Chris at the Wick High School, he had an article in the Times Educational Supplement very recently about why he's using amateur radio in his school. And last time I was up that way, I popped in and saw Chris and saw for myself firsthand youngsters really enthusing about amateur radio and being on the air and making antennas and getting QSL cards and just enjoying the practical application of STEM and seeing a real benefit from doing it. And it was amazing to see. There's a couple of lads out on the sports field with a portable dipole and a radio on with a battery, and they're having a whale of a time, you know. I guess it got them out of PE or something, I don't know, but they were having a great time, and yeah, there's some inspirational stories I won't go into, but that there are more and more teachers getting on the bandwagon and going, do you know what, this can be actually useful. We've got a school down in, I think they're in Cambridge, who just sort of teacher there who's realised that this is, you know, can get kids excited about topics that they wouldn't otherwise be excited about. So watch this space, as they say.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm going to have to pull the plug, unfortunately.
No, it's absolutely, Steve, it's been wonderful to have you. Fantastic.
I'm very pleased to have seen you all, and thank you for your questions and comments and that. I really mean it. If you've not already a member, join up and come along and see us at the convention. You don't have to be a member to come to the talks at Telford. If you're at the Hamfest, just come along and say hi, and we'll have a chat there as well.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Steve, for coming on. Can we show our appreciation to Steve in the normal way, everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
All the best. So,
Yeah,
73s, everybody.
Yeah, 73s. And 73s to those who are watching this on YouTube. And we'll say good night as well to our live listeners on YouTube as